All right, thank you for coming. We have Patrick Mullins here today for our artist interview series, and he is going to be talking to Jessica Chase.
Hi, my name is Patrick Mullins. I'm a professor here at Old Dominion University, as well as being a producer and the director of public works at Virginia Stage Company in downtown Norfolk. And this is our arts innovation series. So a series of conversations with artists and theater makers and art makers of all sorts, and talking about how they've navigated the entrepreneurialism of it all, how they've adjusted either how they distribute work or how they make work, or how they share work with others. And today we have Jessica Chase with us. Jessica Chase is an ODU alumni, actually. She's now in New York. She, I think immediately after undergrad, pretty much, went over to Virginia Stage Company, where she was the company manager. And I'll let her maybe talk a little bit more about what those duties entailed. And then after being the company manager, she moved to New York after a few years and worked for a while with New York Stage and Film, and then eventually with MCC Theater, where she was the artistic producer. And now she is at the New York office for Mark Gordon Pictures. So she's had quite a career already, even though she's very young. And and what I love about Jessica is she's savvy, she's smart, she has great taste, but also she really loves artists. And when I say really loves artists, I don't mean like she loves their work or she likes to talk to famous people. I mean, she really loves all the messiness of what making art is. And she really excels at helping people enable their vision, even and keeping them from getting, even for me at times in my life, keeping people, artists from getting in their own way, and just opening up the world. So so without any further ado, Miss Jessica Chase.
Thank
you. There's thunderous applause. So so Jessica, maybe start by telling us a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing and what your day-to-day is in this new, you've only been here a year-ish?
A little over a year, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I work for Mark Gordon Pictures, which is sort of the newest or the latest endeavor by Mark Gordon. He ran Mark Gordon Company for a long time. And so now this is his, as I said, latest venture. He has assembled 5 producers in New York, London, and LA. And we work in film, TV, and also theater. Theater being sort of the newest thing. And that's part of what I came on to do, was to oversee the launch of a commercial theater program. And really also to sort of take artists who work in theater and sort of loop that into TV and film and vice versa, because it seems like a really good opportunity to share funds and all of those things. There's a lot of crossover. So that's what I'm doing now.
That's very cool. Well, but you started here at ODU. Like what happened at ODU that pushed you in this direction? Or did you have any idea you would go in this direction when you were at ODU?
No, I mean, when I went to ODU, I thought I was going to be an international studies major and I don't know, learn a language and be like the ambassador to France. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And very early on, while I was sort of taking my like basic classes, I took a theater class. I think it was like part of, the prerequisites of whatever. And kind of, it was a technical theater class. I became really involved, and then I got asked to stage manage a show, and I ended up working with people I really liked and a lot of outside directors that had come to ODU, and stage management sort of became my thing. So by the time I graduated, I sort of thought I was going to be the world's greatest stage manager, and also felt sort of burnt out by it, and kind of that's where things sort of opened up. So I ended up majoring in theater there with a minor in communications. And after I graduated, I took 2 shows for ODU to Edinburgh Fringe. And that was sort of my first taste of what it was to produce and to kind of company manage, which was a term that I don't think I really knew what it meant yet. So when we came back, I moved home to California, which is where I'm originally from, and was like ready to start a whole new life there. I was there for about 4 months, and I just started applying to all kinds of like stage management and company management positions, even though I really didn't have any clue what that was. And Chris Hanna had taken over Virginia Stage Company as artistic director, and I sort of got a note from him out of the blue saying, we have this position open. I think you'd be great for it. And so we got on the phone and I talked to him and the managing director at the time, and they offered me the job. And in a week, I was like in my new car that I had bought in California, driving back across the country to come back to Norfolk, which was kind of crazy because I had said goodbye and then had to call on my friends and be like, actually, I'll see you next week. So, that's how I ended up there. And I like to refer to the VSC as sort of my grad school. It was where we met. And where I just got a chance to like learn a bunch of different things. And I kind of got thrown into the deep end. I mean, I think I was 21 at the time, maybe 22. And it was a great kind of learning experience. And it was also where I realized I had a hunger for more. I don't know if you'll remember this, but I was also the artistic administrator. I had a slash in my title. And I think it's just because I wanted to stick my hands in all these different pots. And yeah, so it was my grad school. And then from there, I'd been there for 4 seasons at a point and was like, I don't know, I'm not ready to settle down. I like Norfolk, but I've been here now a long time. I've done everything I feel like I can do here. And so New York, I never had the like, oh, I'm going to end up in New York someday. But I think it was actually my grandfather. He was like, I always thought you'd go try that. And so I did. And then New York sort of kind of opened itself up in a bunch of different ways.
That's amazing. Well, talk a little bit about that, because I have vague memories of you deciding to leave, but you didn't, it's not like you moved there with a full-time job.
No.
Is that true?
No.
Yeah.
I think I realized, this is how I remember it. So, but it was a long time ago. So if I'm lying, well, none of you can fact check me really. So I was seeing the direction that the company was going in, and VSC, and I didn't have a place to grow within that. And so I had sort of decided, well, this will be my last season. And I want to say that was like in December of whatever year that was. And so I just sort of planned, and I had kind of applied for some jobs. I had had some interviews. I'd actually had a meeting with New York Stage and Film before I went. So it was like, I sort of had said, this is the day I'm leaving. This is the day I'm moving to New York. And New York Stage and Film actually offered me a job for that summer that I was leaving, but it would have conflicted with my best friend's wedding, which seems kind of crazy, but I'm glad that this is the way I did it. I was like, I'm not going to miss that. Like, it just doesn't feel worth it to me, because I had already spent so much time, like, missing holidays or whatever doing theater. So I went and stayed in Florida for 3 weeks and got my best friend married, and then moved to the city. And what the hell was the question? Now I'm like lost. Oh,
how did?
Yeah. So I don't know. I got there, I did the whole like suitcase and some money saved, and I had some friends there. And I got a job waiting tables and bartending right away, and started kind of freelancing. So I did some like GM work and some producing work, and then eventually landed with New York Stage and Film. And that was like another place. Joanna Felser, who was the former artistic director there, is like an incredible producer and leader. And she created a lot of space for me to kind of take care of artists, but also get to talk about the work. And I think that's where my passion for developing new work started. And I ended up doing some work with them, in their summer season and outside of it. And after a couple of years with them is when the MCC job came up. And that was sort of like, I had just been meeting with more and more people. And so they needed somebody, and they talked to someone who was like, do you know Jess Chase, if she's available? And so that's kind of how I fell into MCC. I was really originally only supposed to be there for 6 weeks, and 9 years later is when I left. And being at MCC was great. I mean, I was the company manager, associate GM to start. And I think it was about 9 months in, the GM was scheduled to, had decided to leave to pursue something else. And he asked me if I wanted to take over. And that was, I think, the first point where I like listened deep inside my gut, because I kept trying to think that that was the job I wanted, and realized that that path was going to take me further from the kind of producing I wanted to do and the artistic impulses I had. And so I told my bosses at the time, I really want to be an artistic director someday. That, of course, has now shifted, but that's where I was at the moment. And they were like, great, do that here. We're expanding artistically. We're building a new building. Be on that journey with us. And then, I had 4 more titles until I became the artistic producer.
That's a pretty big move, though, from company manager to artistic. I mean, as far as responsibility and input and just having a voice within the company.
Yeah, it was. And I think it was, there's probably like a 2-year period in that where it was like slowly taking on responsibility, but also sometimes, you just get thrown in. I mean, Carrie the musical was the first time I really acted as kind of a line producer, and it was trial by fire in so many ways. And you just sort of go, oh, okay, I can stretch in these muscles, or, stretch this way. And so I just sort of did. And I think, we're always looking in spaces to see who do we trust and who has the similar values. And I think I was lucky enough where artists early on really trusted me. And, I'm definitely 10,000 times a better producer than I was 8 years ago. But that's sort of the journey we're all on, right? Where we're constantly, learning a new thing and how to stretch.
Can you, a lot of us aren't theater people necessarily, and even those of us who are might not have a full idea of what so many things and nothing. Can you talk about what it means for you to be a producer?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little bit about identifying talent, and I'm based in like a totally new work sort of field, so it's about reading scripts and looking for the kernels of things, and then kind of picking projects and shepherding them from beginning to end. So some of it's contracts and numbers, and some of it is really like, how do we put together a team and best support this work and what do you be in, and how can how do you support it with marketing and all those things. I know that's really vague. It's been really interesting. Like, now I work for a film and TV company, and it's funny, sometimes we'll talk about a theater thing and I'll realize like how different it is from film and TV. And I'm like, oh, I'm not used to having to explain this, which is basically mumbling or rambling.
No. You're great. So, I mean, what it sounds like is you have connections to take artists and connect them to, and you get to use your connections to build networks for people and connect people to people and create work that way, sort of.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's, the muscles that I've sort of trained up are also like identifying what's not working and how to like note something, or how to take it and sort of get inside and tinker with something to kind of help it be its best version of whatever the thing might be. Yeah.
It makes me think of those home renovation shows on HGTV that you kind of find a property or a piece that has a lot of promise, and then you connect it to the right contractors that can help it improve, and then eventually you help them sell it for a lot more money.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Except I don't have any skills with actual houses or interior design.
Right, right. I'm going to go back and ask a question about, because I often hear people talk about how they went from ODU to somewhere else and what that journey is. And we hit it like in 3 bullet points, but there's so much more to it than that. Like when you move to the city, and shy away from anything you want to shy away from here, but like what's the reality of that and how did you make it work? Because I just freelanced a little. It did sound so easy, but yeah, when we think about like making that jump, it sounds super scary. Like, did you have a bunch of money saved up before you moved so you had a nice cushion? Like, what were the proactive things you did and what were the things you learned in adjusting to a completely new environment?
Yeah, and well, I think I had $2,500 saved. I think it wasn't
Wow.
more than that. And I definitely got rid of everything. I will say the one thing I still regret to this day is I gave away a ton of books that I didn't bring with me, and sometimes I miss them. I don't even remember what they were now because I've repopulated, but that was my one regret. No, it was hard, and it was hard to get footing in, and I didn't realize how much people would not take my experience seriously. There was a lot of oh yeah, you worked at a theater, but not in New York. Like it was pretty dismissive. I don't think people were intentionally trying to be that way, and I think it's shifted some now, but there was sort of that air to it. And I remember having meetings with some people who I am close to and am working with now, who met with me and kind of it was a nice to meet you, and that was about it. So it's funny how it all works out. I do think that it ended up becoming about connect, like each thing. And I always think it's so fascinating because you can look back and be like, oh, this is how this works. When you're in it, it's just a constant like putting yourself out there, and how things end up happening you kind of can never predict. Like my job at MCC was because I had interviewed for a job at the Atlantic, and I was like second runner up and didn't get it. And that was crushing to me then. But honestly, had I gotten that job, I don't know that I would have been able to do the things I was able to do at MCC. So it is funny. And, you just kind of have to meet as many people as you can and put yourself out there and keep chugging away at it. And I think it is scary, but also life is short. And so if you want it, like anything is possible if you want it, and you have to put it into bite-sized pieces. And I do think there was a time where I was like waiting tables. At one point I was coat checking, which is the most money anybody. And I would just like read books and check coats and leave with a lot of money. Anyway, but there was a point where it was hard to find the motivation to do the work that I ultimately wanted to be doing, because you're making money and you're living in the city and you are staying out too late. At least that was my jam. And especially when you're freelancing, having the muscles of like, okay, like, but this is going to be my artistic practice, or this is how I'm going to put myself out there. It can be really hard. So the first couple of years were bumpy, for sure.
Do you consider yourself extroverted? Like, are you comfortable with that lifestyle, being out all the time?
Yeah, but also it's still exhausting. Like I'm extroverted in the way where I can talk to people, like I like being out, but it does also take me like some energy to put that on, or to, I do get, it was actually one of the helpful things about moving to New York. I was always somebody who was like, I could talk to people and I'd like to be out, but if I had to go to like a new thing, I would be nervous to go by myself. And New York really forced me outside of that bubble. I do think it's harder for people who are really introverted to put that effort, but and I definitely have to recharge. I mean, now is such a weird time, but in general, if I'm out a bunch, like I have to then not talk to anybody for several hours.
I can relate to that. um, so development of new work, let's start with theater, because that's what you've done most. You started with that at New York Stage and Film, and you talked a little bit about some good influences there. What was what was your end there, or what did you learn the most there? Any stories? And I know that I remember hearing names that you mentioned then that I still hear from you years later and even today. So like, who are those people and what did you learn there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I, what I learned there, I think the thing is, so Joanna Felser, who was the artistic director for a very long time, she's now the head of Berkeley Rep. She was really amazing at leaving doors open. You know what I mean? Like, she asked my opinion, or she would let me have an opinion. And I say let me, but you know, when you're kind of coming up, sometimes there are places where you need to be quiet. And I think that's the thing that's always been amazing, is that if you spend enough time listening, when you do speak, like, then people will pay attention. And so there I mean, there are relationships that I formed there that have continued to cross paths with or work together for God now over a decade. And I think because, I mean, that place in particular, although, you know, it's shifting post, or I mean, I know we're still in the pandemic, but like kind of post that initial shutdown, they are, it's, you know, it's like a summer camp. So you can like work too hard, and it's fast and furious, and you meet a ton of people. And yeah, I don't know. I learned to listen. I learned to pay attention. I learned sort of what artists I found really exciting, and that has continued to shift and change. Because to take it back to ODU, it's like, there was a lot of really interesting work. And then there was also a lot of stuff I didn't learn, like that they didn't either teach, or it wasn't a part of the thing. And so, yeah, I guess it was good to more work.
I was going to ask this.
Sorry, go.
Say that again. I missed it.
Oh, just the ways people work, because you know what I mean? Like, there's, in college, it's very much this way.
Yeah, it's a little more hierarchical and driven, and they're, you know, in those ways. I was going to ask this later, but since you kind of bring it up, I'll ask it now. What is the thing you learned at ODU that served you the best? Let me start with that one.
The thing, oh, God, my joke has always been that I've been too stupid to keep my mouth shut. And I think that was true then and is true now. There was a lot of encouragement at ODU, but there was a lot of people telling me what I should or shouldn't do, or what they wanted me to do. And that was the place where I think I started to be like, no, you know, like, I want to do what I want to do. And I don't mean that in the arrogant way that it probably comes across, but don't tell Chris this, but there was like, I remember one time very specifically, he was like, I want you to do this show that I'm doing. And I was like, nah, I want to do this other thing that's with this outside director that, you know, that we took to Edinburgh. And I was like, that's the thing I want to do, you know? And I think that is something that I think we all have to figure out in this world, is like, how do we ask for exactly what we want? And be open to the fact that we're not always right, or like, you know, whatever the things might be. But I think that was where, I don't know, the fire got lit, to not be put in a box. It's got me in lots of trouble over the years, but it's also really paid off. Yeah,
no, clearly. The other side of that is, what's the thing you wish you had learned here that you learned later?
Yeah, I don't feel like, I think there was a lot of real world shit that people didn't teach, or at least then, you know, this was some years ago. So it was a long time ago. And I think that there's so many of the practicalities of working in this business, or in the business around art that people don't teach in school, and you need to know it. Like, you have to figure out like what the unions are and what your health insurance looks like, and how to budget something, and how to make connections, and what those and how to navigate the world in that way, that I didn't really understand, and I didn't really know. I thought stage managers made a lot of money. Like, that was a thing that I thought was a true thing, which is not true. And it ranges, like all things do, but and I also never really became a professional stage manager, but it's like the practicals I think that we need more of. And I think also how to be more than one thing, which I think we are talking more and more about in industries. It's, the multi-hyphenate. There was such an idea that you had to do one thing and you had to do it really well, and that's the only way that it works, I think, is a lie. And it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a thing that was actively taught when I was coming up, was don't be a multi-hyphenate, because then they'll try to hire you for this thing that you only sort of do instead of the thing that you really want to do. Mm-hmm. So if I can pry a little more, where did you learn about insurance and budgets and that sort of stuff?
I mean, some of it was just on the fly, and it's just like you suddenly are forced to, and you're like, okay, well then I guess this is a thing. And yeah, you just kind of have to, because the real world that presents you with a lot of like factual information.
Yeah. Well, let's jet forward to MCC. Because you were there quite a period of time, and you did get to work on some really cool stuff and with some really cool artists. I remember going to some parties and being like, "Oh my God, they're here," and feeling like this much cool for 2 minutes. So how was that, and what did you learn there?
It was a long journey. It was almost a decade of work and energy. And I think I sort of think of it in two parts. There was sort of the first half of it, which was the, establishing an artistic department and all of those things. And then there was sort of the second half of it where a lot of that had been established, and we were really able to move the company forward and shift a lot of the thinking and programming. I really, there was a lot to be learned there. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. I think once I got sort of established and understood how to produce off Broadway, I then was able to think about actually what is the impact of this and what is the future of it. Running an institution is really complicated in how they're structured and organized. And it became really clear as we were growing, how white the institution was, and how sort of stuck in certain pathways, and how if we wanted to be relevant, or not even if we wanted to be relevant, if we wanted to do the kind of work, the kind of work I wanted to do shifted, and how we did it shifted, and how we support community, which I think sometimes can get lost. But New York has so much to offer. So it was a lot of figuring out those things, and then figuring out how to make programming that was necessary. Or an example is we had a reading series that it would be these day of readings that we would put on, and an audience would come, and I just was like, this isn't serving the artist, it's not serving the work. If we're going to spend the time, let's do a week-long rehearsal, let's give the opportunity to really work on a piece and then hear it in front of an audience, and make the money that we're spending worth it in a really real way. And so that, that's what the sort of last 5 years I was there was really about, was cultivating artists and artist relationships, and being like, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? And seeing those things kind of happen. And the programming really shifted in a way that I was very excited about.
Yeah, you were enough of a voice that you're even quoted in the Times and talking about Schoolgirls or the African Mean Girls play as having been a person who is in the pathway of that process.
Yeah, Schoolgirls was a really great experience, and Jocelyn has become a great friend and collaborator. And that was a play that I sort of heard at New Black Fest and was like, oh, there's something here. It was still a bit messier than it, obviously than it became, but it was a thing where, and then actually it was because I heard her at the talk about how she had just been sort of dismissed by so many people. You know, she's like first generation Ghanaian and, you know, from New York, and she writes African comedy. And she got a lot of like pushback that was like, well, how can you write about Africa and have this much laughter and joy? And I thought that was such a ridiculous thing, and realized how true it was. Like most of the, you know, those that were being produced by Black artists were really, you know, in trauma, and being able to become a champion of that piece. I mean, I don't know that I could have predicted how big it would have become, but it, you know, had 2 runs in New York. We did a run out in LA, and it's been produced, I think, like 17 times across the country in the last couple of years. So that was a project I was really proud of. And, but that's the thing. It's like paying attention to like, oh, who's saying no? I don't know. That's a thing that I've always kind of like gotten off on, is like, and that's such a terrible way to put it, but like, oh, like what are the things that people can't see the potential in? And then how do I make that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've worked with a lot of really great artists, from like Duncan Sheik to Zasha Mamet to Anika Nani Rose. Like, you've worked with some cool people, and people who are doing really cool stuff on television right now too. Made was amazing, and so was the flight attendant. Like these people are, you know, kind of a big deal. Do you have any good stories or any favorite moments? Or I don't mean anything messy, but like anything that was fun?
All of it was fun. I mean, I have, oh God, I nothing that I can talk about here. No, I have very lucky. I should have thought of this before we got on this call, because I'm sure there's a good anecdote. But yeah, you know, that's the thing. It's like people are people. And so you know, I don't know, that's kind of how I always approach it. The sort of, I hope this is okay to say, but like the star fuckery of the business has never really appealed that much to me.
Right.
So it's really nice to work with and meet these people as the human beings that they are. And I'll tell you stories.
I think that's what I was referring to at the beginning, though, is how much you just appreciate artists and people as people, right? With the complicatedness, and, you know, and we are all just human. And there's a real generosity that you bring to that has always been beautiful to watch, and how you dealt with artists. I remember this one cast that I won't mention, but evidently went skinny dipping in The Hague a long time ago at Virginia Stage Company, or some members did. And the way you handled that even like was charming, and you let them have fun, but you also like kept them from getting in trouble, and not saying that other artists do that or whatever. But I don't know. It's just, there's a,
in my defense, I was 22.
You didn't take them skinny dipping.
Yes, I did.
Did you? Oh, you did.
I jumped in with them. It wasn't skinny dipping. We were fully.
Okay, good.
But we did jump in The Hague, and we do every time we all run into each other. Like, remember that one time? But it was, yeah, no, it was not skinny dipping. But I did jump in The Hague once, which I don't recommend.
No, that's amazing. So as we head toward kind of a little bit of a wrap up, talk to us about life habits and how, like, as busy and as out there as you are and meeting people and all the things you have to do, how do you balance that out? I know you do a lot of yoga. I know that you have some diet things that you follow that seem to help you. Do you mind talking about any of that?
Yeah, and I will say, I actually got really bad at it. My last year at MCC, we opened a building. I opened 6 shows a year, plus launched all these programs, and I was working, 80 plus hours a week, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And I was, the way I coped was like meeting people for drinks to blow off steam. And I think that kind of, when I left, I also left MCC in end of February 2020 for anybody keeping track of the pandemic. And so leaving was in part about like resetting and what that looked like. And I've sort of made myself a promise that I'll never go back to that place of not having work-life balance, because I think, what's the thing? It's like, we only have so much water in our cup and we can only give what we have. And so I think it's really important to figure out what that balance is for, each of us individually. So I actually very into Peloton now. That's my thing. I get on the bike.
Oh, yeah?
Most days a week, and just like, because I have discovered, like, for me, moving my body actually helps keep me sane. And so that's an active practice that I have to like keep centered. And I can feel the difference if I've gone 5 days, like my body will sort of let me know that it's pissed. I've been vegetarian or vegan for like 25 years, but that was a decision I made very young. And so that just is like how I feel good. Like, I eat a lot of plants. I still drink too much coffee. I love some good red wine, but I also think that like that in itself is self-care. And I did a meditation practice during the pandemic that I felt really helped me ground. And my therapist, I also, do some therapy, had recommended it. And I was like, I feel like you're a lot, like, I think people who say that they meditate and it changes their life are lying. But during the pandemic, I really made an active practice, and I found that to be really changing, and the effects of it are cumulative. So yeah, those are my sort of good habits, I guess.
That's pretty great. One last question, then I'll open it up in case anybody else has questions. But if you had anything to tell folks who are sitting at ODU now or early in their career, what advice would you give since you've made a similar journey?
I think the best advice is to like, I don't know if it's the best, but I think you just have to like listen and pay attention and be really clear about what you want. And if you're unclear about it, like, take a walk in the woods and figure out what that is. I'm a deep believer that everything sort of continues to like lead you in the path that you're supposed to be on. And setbacks are great because they teach you how to pivot or grow from them. And I think, like, we're at a place in the world where be whatever you want to be, and like, don't let anybody tell you that you only have one lane. Like, take up as much space as you need to or want to. And whenever anybody says no, just like use that as motivation to sort of keep going.
Awesome. I think what you do, even though we call it producing, I mean, you are an entrepreneur. You find glimmers of product or possibility. You connect it to a revenue stream, to people who can lift it. I mean, that kind of is. So that's why I wanted to talk to you today. And thank you for taking time with us. Are there any questions from the audience? Anybody?
Is anybody even there? I can only see you.
There's about 6 or 7 of us.
Hi, 6 or 7 of you.
Oh, he's zooming out so you can see. She's seeing you from behind. There you go. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us today. I won't tell Chris Hanna what you said, but I'm pretty sure he's on the call. So,
But it's actually like a testament to him too.
absolutely.
He gave me a lot of opportunity, and and he knows I'm a pain in the ass. So none of this is new.
I think we have that in common with Chris. All right. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. Thank you all for coming today. And hopefully I'll see you in New York soon. Yeah?
Yeah. I'm here. I'm ready. Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you soon. Bye. Thank you.